Guys, Victor here, with an update on the Skywalker Attack. Thank you, Luke, for commenting on my video. So, first and foremost, Skywalker Attack. This move right here is very good, as far as I can tell, for green and blue, because if you continue with the Skywalker Attack, first, double checkmate threat. And you have to consider there's a very strong tension that's been created by moving this pawn up here. Neither bishop wants to capture, because as stated in the previous video, this capture frees up the queen to not only come out and play, but also to come in for a checkmate on the other king if that queen should leave the battlefield. So, in the Rezak's Icy Stun variation, there is a capture here I suggested in my previous video. Let's move over here, and I think both are comparable in terms of how good they are for red and yellow, because the idea still continues. What green and blue do here is they create a checkmate threat on the red queen. This tension can only be taken advantage of if the red queen is able to come in and coordinate with the light squared bishop. This is the primary idea behind the Skywalker Attack. And this opening, these pawns coming in for a checkmate threat on red, directly not only force red to waste an extra move to avoid checkmate, but also take away any advantage that would have otherwise been had in this opening. So this defense is considerably strong. And not only would I say it's equal, it might even be better for green and blue. Because after you continue looking to keep yellow from the plan, which, by the way, I'm not sure is even a good idea, because I think you just knight down in the circumstance. After yellow takes, green has to get out of the check. Red, in my previous video, I said red could come over here, and I missed something kind of obvious. After red takes, I said, okay, rook up, but I missed a very quick and obvious counterattack, if you want to call it that. Blue does something. Yellow, I don't know what yellow does. But green comes in, and this is a knight up for green and blue. Not to mention an open file for the rook. I don't know what blue does here, but next turn, so long rook. So I just want to say, I think this defense is very strong. In fact, if you're playing against somebody that you know is prone to aggression and may try the Skywalker Attack out, I would suggest trying this opening out on them, if they're also really good players. Because to me it looks very good for blue and green. So that out of the way, I wanted to address a few mistakes I made in my last video. I said in my last video that the other defense, the Skywalker Attack, after yellow does this, is let's move the pawn up 2. I think that's better than 1. We're going to go with that. Now, in this variation, I said capturing is not a good idea because it gives the red queen way too much power. And you won't believe how quickly the checkmate threats pile up on blue. Usually at least losing a rook. With a very strong initiative for red and yellow. So we're not going to go over that variation. What's considered a lot better is moving the knight over here. So after yellow comes here, the check on green. Green has no choice but move there to avoid checkmate. And what follows from here is red continues with the Skywalker attack. Now I said in my previous video that this is not a move because yellow comes over here looking to get very active. Green comes over here to put a check on red if yellow decides to try to go in for the checkmate. And what red does, sacrifice the bishop. Now, can't really take back, because if you do, then check and checkmate. And pretty much, when all is said and done, with this pawn to avoid a check, the bishop to avoid the queen being captured, green has to either give up a bishop or red's coming in to cause some serious damage in blue's house. So this pawn up looks to be a pretty bad idea. I don't know what blue can do besides capture here, because threats are piling up, and they're piling up really quickly. To me, I don't think that it's a good idea to push the pawn. I think something that's much better is to push that pawn. And I said in my previous video that from here, yellow moves over here for a few reasons. You have an available checkmate threat on green. Additionally, you're looking to sacrifice your bishop and cause some serious damage to the the blue king. So, I said this is the worst of the two openings, and in my previous video I said you sacrifice to the red bishop. As Luke pointed out, this doesn't give the same advantage I was hoping for. So actually you sacrifice this bishop. You have to take back, because otherwise it's going to be an obvious material advantage. And so from here, going for the sacrifice, green comes in, and red, being smart, comes over here. Now, if you take back, yellow checks, and green has to move down here to avoid checkmate. Take back, take. Now in the previous video, when I said you take with the bishop, that bishop took back. And I said that this move was not viable. Or rather, Luke corrected me in saying that move is not viable. Because green could come over here. And after red takes, blue has an escape square. But now that it was this bishop that was taken instead, checkmate. So thank you, Luke, for the observation. It's not wise to take back in this situation, because that runs into checkmate. So I think another option, as stated, was to move the queen over here. And in this variation, what you do, you just go in for check. Now, I suggested that green comes down for check, take back, and blue, if he takes, runs into, well, some serious problems. He has to come over here, and that's going to be a very quick checkmate for Team Blue and Green. So, you can't take with the king, and you can't take with the queen either, because it's pinned to the king. So what you have to do is you have to run away. And from here, there are just all kinds of threats that can be made. You can take, you can coordinate all kinds of attacks. Things are not looking very good for Team Blue and Team Green in this opening. So that's one variation. And something else to note in this variation is you don't necessarily have to check. Let's say instead green does something else, like that. What this does is this buys red an extra move. What red does here is red takes. Now blue has to take. And from here, yellow moves back. Red, in the meantime, is prepared to come in with a check threat, and yellow coordinates with red to concert an attack on blue. I'm not entirely sure what green does here, but whatever it is, doesn't look very good. Again, the king is very exposed and very susceptible to all kinds of threats in this opening. Not to mention, you could create a double check to lure the king out. So that's how you continue. In this variation, I suggested that instead of the knight, the queen is a lot stronger. Now in this variation, still take back. And as yellow, you can't just sacrifice, because the queen will come down here to counter the move that yellow is looking to do. So as yellow, you must look to create a checkmate threat on green. Green responds, knowing that red just put forth a bishop. Red takes back. Blue, yellow, and green. And what red does, let's not only attack the bishop, let's also move the queen to safety and also put a checkmate threat on blue should the queen wish to get out of the picture. Now blue, being smart, moves over here to look for a checkmate. And after blue does this, a few things to consider in this position. You know how I said that this pawn up 2 was a lot better? Here's one example why it is much better. Normally, if it was only up 1, and the green bishop moved over here to attack the rook, then yellow could move in and red could check, soon with a checkmate. But in this circumstance, because the diagonal is blocked off, green is afforded this very timely attack on the red rook. So blue moves in. Yellow has a couple of options. I'm not entirely sure what the best one is. One option is to coordinate with the red queen. Now, red would really like to go here for a few reasons. One, it gives you much more control over that space. But of course, you can't do that because the green bishop is right here. And so, in this variation, after the red queen moves over here, blue moves over here. Yellow, knowing that green is going to come in, says, okay, I need to prepare for what I see to come. Green moves in. Red moves in here. And blue has to take into account that there's still this checkmate threat looming around the corner. Blue has no choice but to move the knight up here to counter that threat. And so, Here, play becomes a little more ominous. I really don't know how play continues. You have check threat on green. Red queen can coordinate some kind of attack on green with the double take threat. You could look to exploit dark squared bishop on that diagonal. What I do know is that the red queen is a lot more active than the blue queen. Blue queen will come out to play very soon. So another thing to consider is you can make a exchange threat. That way, if the blue queen comes out to exchange with the red queen, well, then red could take and yellow could come in to take the pawn and then win the rook and the exchange. So these are some ideas to consider in this variation. Again, the Icy Stun Rezax variation is very powerful and seems to me to be the best continuation. And as stated in the previous video, if blue moves over here first, Skywalker Attack is really doomed to fail, because after this move here, red goes over here. Skywalker Attack, blue just takes. And take back with the queen. Very important to do it with the queen. Check. Red comes in. Blue moves in. And after you put the pawn up, the check, red can either move here or here. Both are similar in how good they are. I think here might be better, because after you take a knight capture, you have an immediate move on the blue queen. And if you take, you put the rook on an open file. So that stated, this is the Skywalker Attack. The Icy Stun Rezax variation looks very equalish. So if you're playing against some really good players, I would highly suggest trying out this opening, because the only other alternative, as far as we know, to the Skywalker Attack is the classical variation, which is considered kind of equalish for both sides, comparative to these other flashy new openings, like the Sicilian Khan variation, and of course the Skywalker Attack. So hope you liked it. If you think I missed anything, feel free to let me know, and I'll catch you next time. Peace out.